Thanks very much for joining me, Deanna. I just want to see how are you today?
Doing well, thanks, Mike. How are you?
I am good. I'm glad we can meet on our little bit of time differences here. Excellent. Thank you very much for coming and being part of the podcast, which is for your organization. So this is a weird element for me, is the organizing the person that recruited me into this position. Um, so thank you very much for taking the time to set this up. I just want to go through some things that the audience would probably want to know about you, about the organization, and what we do here, because obviously myself being on the inside, I see some of the great communications that happen internally, some of the fantastic research, and I kind of wanted to, you know, go behind the curtain, to pull a phrase from The Wizard of Oz, and just see what we kind of do here, and so the audience have a greater understanding of yourself and the organization. So I'd like to start, if you don't mind, by telling me a little bit about yourself and what first drew you into the field of human rights.
Yes, where to begin?
Mm.
I'll start with my undergrad
hmm
journey.
Nice.
So I'm originally from Indiana, and
Oh,
I moved to California my senior year of high school, and
yeah.
then enrolled at UCLA for my undergrad. I got my bachelor's degree in sociology and political
hmm
science as a minor. Really was interested in uh, human elements, community, but also had a fascination with politics, both
hmm
domestic and international. After undergrad, I ended up in a job completely unrelated to my field,
hmm
and as happens often
We've all
to
been
many
there.
people. And from there, though, I realized a few years in that I wanted to do something more meaningful. Didn't know
hmm
quite what that was, but instead of just looking for another job or pursuing further education, I thought it logical to buy a one-way ticket to Thailand. Very logical.
I'm a big fan of one-way tickets.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know what I was going to do, but I just knew I wanted to explore and take some time to myself.
Yeah.
And while I was in Thailand, I got to experience the amazing culture, meet so many different people, and ran into some fellow foreigners, Farang,
Mm.
in Thailand who were doing an ESL, like teaching ESL
Yeah. hmm
course. And I was interested and started to do
Mm.
that. I ended up staying in Thailand for a year, then got a job in China doing the same thing, teaching English.
Yeah.
But during those formative years in Asia,
Yeah.
I witnessed some unjust things, including making friends in a community in Thailand who were trafficking victims, currently in a
God.
situation of
hmm
trafficking to work in a massage
Okay.
parlor. And they were such wonderful women, and I felt kind of at a loss of and
hmm
helpless in a way. Like, how can I do anything? This isn't my country. Sadly, at the time and where I was located, there seemed to be quite some corruption with law
Yeah.
enforcement. So my hands felt very tied, and I was like, I wasn't familiar with the issue of human trafficking on a more complex understanding, I'd say.
hmm
I knew of it, but I didn't know all the nuances and what went into the industry, how people ended up getting trafficking and things. So having that experience ended up spurring me to apply to a master's program in the UK, your home.
Uh-huh.
So I did my master's in international relations at the University of Nottingham, and a lot of my focus was on the human rights elements in international relations. So I took a few modules there, and
hmm
that fascinated me, as well as writing my thesis, or in the UK, dissertation, my master's
Dissertation, we call it. Yeah.
dissertation, on how war and conflict exacerbate human trafficking
Yeah.
within Southeast Asia. So that was something I delved into. Uh, the research there was hard to
Yeah.
read, but important. And from there, like I knew I wanted to go into the nonprofit space immediately. Like helping people. I just still didn't know what it looked like. Was that me on the ground? I honestly thought I was going to be on the ground helping people, helping refugees
Absolutely.
and things.
Yeah. On
Um,
borders, helping them get into places, trying to
yes,
give out food and aid. Where?
yes. And so once I got into the nonprofit space, I was trying to like see what roles there were, how I could best fit in and best support. And
Hmm.
as time went on, I ended up at this first human rights organization called Genocide Watch.
Okay.
Um, I started there as like a senior program officer and research officer. So doing that kind of work, and then moved to chief program officer of the organization, helping recruit teams like different
Yeah.
research analysts and also social media. I handled the communications
Hmm.
team as well. Had, I think, 30 interns or volunteers at the same time that I
Oh my God.
oversaw and
Yeah.
coordinated.
Mm.
And I
Great
found that,
experience for where you are now, housing armies of volunteers, which you've got.
yes, yes. And that actually fostered my interest in creating something of my own. And
Mhm.
Eli Sidlow, the
Yes.
co-founder, um, I actually met him at Genocide Watch. He was my intern.
Oh, oh, really? Well,
Yes.
that perfectly leads me up to my next question, which was what was the moment when you realized there was a need for the Human Rights Research Center, which we do call HERC here? When was your sense that we needed this? Obviously, you were working for Genocide Watch. And what was the moment where you thought we need this HERC here?
Some of it, I have to say, was a bit
Oh,
self-interest
yeah.
in terms of how I wanted to explore any
Yes.
topic
Hmm.
of human rights and anything that interested me. And I felt that there weren't a lot of places to do so.
Hmm.
Like, for example, Genocide Watch, we only focused on genocide,
Yes, of course.
understandably. But I have so many interests when it comes to human rights. And same with Eli. We had numerous conversations, and we're like, I would love to create a space where we could explore whatever
Mm,
we desire. But in addition, given our backgrounds and experience, we saw that there's kind of a similar background to a human rights researcher,
yeah.
which is incredibly valuable. But we know it's also important to have that multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach to human rights. So creating a space where people from all backgrounds could be part of human rights research, and
Hmm.
people who are coming from fields where they can better explain the nuances of how human rights intersect within their field. Something that Eli and I might not be better able to discuss. So we
Hmm.
want that was the kind of like the core foundation of the
Yeah.
organization. But the second most important part of our organization is realizing that this information needs to be accessible. We know coming from the academic background, you're writing this research, and who's reading
Hmm.
it? Fellow researchers.
Yes.
And we wanted to bridge that gap because these are critical issues, and we really wanted to make them accessible for the general public.
Was that something you'd say was a kind of a stumbling block early on that you realized that you, as human rights researchers, develop great research, but it's only read by other human rights researchers? I know great colleagues of mine who are researchers now in humanitarianism typically only read other people's humanitarian work, and it's not really your day-to-day Joe Blogs who's stumbling across this. Is that one of the issues you had early on, and that's kind of made you develop Herc in the way that it has?
And actually, this started at the very beginning, the
Okay.
accessibility. And that's because experience and just personal life.
Hmm.
For example, working at Genocide Watch and having these discussions like, what is genocide? There were so many ones
Hmm.
currently going on, and talking about them or explaining them to family and friends. It's like they don't understand the terminology, like what I'm saying. And like, how do I break this down for them so they
Hmm.
know how important this is? Like, how do I get them to understand? And so using different words, phrases, breaking it down into something more digestible. And I thought about that. That's just in my personal life. This
Mm,
applies to so many people. And
absolutely.
also just seeing the rise of misinformation and disinformation as well,
Mm,
it became even more critical. I'm like, there's so much floating out there, and people's eyes glaze over headlines.
yeah.
So, how do we get people to engage and understand these issues? So, it came at the beginning of Herc. That was part of our ploy is like include glossary of terms,
Yeah.
include hyperlinks, make things more accessible and
Make
more
people
digestible.
understand, it's more digestible. I have a good friend of mine who will just voice note me at 2 in the morning and ask, "What's this issue about?" To which I don't answer at 2 in the morning. But it's a similar thing of they've read something in the newspapers, seen it on the headlines, but it's about understanding what's behind that because, as you say, people catch glimpses of little titles and headlines and they don't really get the full picture, which is obviously quite big. So I really love what we do here at Herc on that element. And I want to kind of go back a little bit to the amount of volunteers and what you'd mentioned about a wide amount of different, I want to say landscapes, not the right word, but backgrounds is the right word I'm looking for. Herc's grown a lot in terms of the volunteer network. I was amazed when I joined and seen everyone what their background is, where they're from, and that we're not all, similar types of people. There's such a wide variety of people that I've met so far, and I've only been here a short while. Have there been any challenges when it comes to attracting and retaining talent when it's all around a bit of a shared mission?
So, initially, we started with 7 volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
myself included. And we had come from like contacts of Genocide Watch,
Mm-hmm.
like former interns, current interns who had interest in being part of this startup organization.
Mm-hmm.
Recruitment in a startup can be challenging,
Absolutely.
especially in volunteer positions. So it took a while for us to get situated with more external volunteers coming into the organization. We also wanted to build more of a portfolio of research.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think in general, having that portfolio made us more visible,
Yeah.
made people see that we are doing something, like there's tangible work there that they
Mm-hmm.
can see. And that helped foster more applications. We did our recruitment basically on like volunteer match and idealist and
Mm-hmm.
under their volunteer section and shared on social media and spread through our own networks asking if people would be interested. As time went on, we saw a substantial increase of volunteer applications, actually
Mm-hmm.
around 2023 when Israel Gaza started.
Yes. Yeah,
We
imagine.
saw a huge influx. At that point, we were probably 30 or 40 volunteers,
Mm-hmm.
and we doubled that
Instantly.
instantly and then have since gone beyond. Currently, just 3 years later, we have, I think, 140 people now.
Incredible.
So,
And the
very,
mission in itself to keep them all contained and keep everybody on the same mission and the same workload and same push forward. But it seems from
yeah,
where I've stood and where I've seen, there's such a huge amount of enthusiasm still within all of the volunteers.
yes. And I think that goes to organizational culture as
Hmm.
well. We recognize that you're volunteers, you're here
Hmm.
because you want to be.
Yeah.
So there's not necessarily a different motivating factor than like a
Hmm.
paid job, but it's not a whole motivating factor
No.
because a paid job you are getting money, obviously.
Hmm.
But if you're in the nonprofit space, you tend to go for mission-oriented work, so you have to have some sort of passion behind it. We, not having paid staff, just have the
Hmm.
passion, and
Yeah.
it's amazing. Our organizational culture, going back to recognizing that people are volunteers, we know you have lives outside of volunteering. We aren't demanding. Like we set our internal deadlines for things, but we're
Hmm.
flexible in that.
Yeah.
Just because you have your lives, things happen. We have some students, for example, in law school, undergrads as well, who might have exams or papers
Yeah.
due. There are full-time professionals as well who have families working with
Hmm.
us, and they might have an event for their child.
Yeah.
And coming from all different walks of life and different backgrounds, there are different needs. And so, what we request is that communication and just keeping everyone updated so we can
Hmm.
adjust accordingly internally. And I think having that kind of flexibility and fostering their continued involvement, allowing commitments to shift. What does it look like? I think that's what has kept
Hmm.
our volunteers passionate and involved. We do require like a 6 month
Hmm.
minimum time commitment, which
Of course.
developed a couple of years ago, actually. And I'd say 90% of people stay on beyond 6 months.
Absolutely. It seems like a lot of people really enjoy it. I know the social aspect of it is really busy and everyone seems really involved. And anytime I put anything out there to talk to people, everyone's very quick to get involved and to speak, even though it's voluntary, as they've got lives outside of this. Everybody's pretty open to and willing to get engaged. So it seems that
Mhm.
there's a really great culture. And I think a lot of that comes to the fact that partly it is voluntary. I do my job in the daytime because I get paid to do it. It's not my passion, but for this, we all love to push forward human rights and to get what we do in here at Herc out to a greater audience. Looking at the broader aspect of changes in the world, because you said you started initially on Genocide Watch, and then you've branded and created Herc, and things will obviously have shifted in time. Are there any major human rights concerns you have at the moment for kind of what's going out there in the broader world?
Absolutely. I think there are too many to list,
Yeah,
sadly.
absolutely.
It's like very
Sadly, that's
sadly.
the sad situation that we're in, that there's too many to mention. But is there anything that's really kind of at the pinnacle for you at the moment that you've noticed quite a lot, or maybe something that's surged up recently that's not getting enough attention? I know we've been
I
discussing in certain podcasts on the use of AI and the human rights element around AI. That's been something that's really fascinating, and we've got an episode coming out about that soon. But is there anything that's taking precedent for you?
I think um, being here in the US and
Hmm.
seeing the deterioration of human rights under the Trump administration has
Yeah.
been very impactful. And I was directly impacted as well, being a US aid worker.
Hmm.
So uh, obviously,
Yeah.
everyone knows what happened there. It was heartbreaking. I wasn't there that long, um, but it was such an empowering organization, and you're working with such incredible people that it was
Hmm.
still heart-wrenching, even though I wasn't there long. And
Yeah.
then witnessing the fallout of the withdrawal of aid and people losing their jobs and,
Hmm.
more importantly, people losing their lives. So that put it very close to home for me. And then to see the continued violations of rights and
Yeah.
disregard for law, that's become something prevalent in my life.
Hmm.
Obviously, there are horrible human rights violations around the world, ongoing genocides in like in Gaza and Sudan. Um, but this one, it was like the close to home because
Hmm.
it's not something I imagined happening in the US, as our country self describes as
Hmm.
like a free nation.
Yes.
Yeah, so
Leader of the free world, I believe.
leader of the free world. Yeah, and yet those freedoms only apply to a certain number of people,
Mhm.
apparently.
I remember that moment, and I was recently reading a research paper on that as well for my dissertation, which was on cash as humanitarian aid, and the cuts from US aid had a gigantic detriment on how much money we could give out as cash. What was also fascinating and I say fascinating loosely, it wasn't a nice fascination, is how much of a knock on effect that drop in funding had internationally, because geopolitically, every other nation's leader followed suit in that when Donald Trump and his administration made those cuts, then the United Kingdom under our previous Prime Minister Keir Starmer made a similar cut, and then European nations also made a bit of a cut. So these things have a huge knock-on effect. So, as you're right in the fact that those cuts from the government and USA had such a detrimental effect on those involved, but even more further afield, because in the geopolitical sense that people copy what the United States does, and therefore we lose astronomically more money. I know our colleagues in the UN doing great work, and their funding had just gone completely because USAID funds so many more organizations that we imagine, even into the big funders within the European Union of certain programs in or backers certainly in the UN. So I completely agree to how detrimental that is. You noted earlier on, and I was fascinated by it, is one of your main goals is making research really accessible to non-specialists, and that's why we've done podcasts, and that's why we're doing all these great social media posts. Why is it so important in an era of misinformation and information overload, I'd say, to have research available and accessible to non-specialists?
Well, again, that goes to misinformation and disinformation and just loads of content out there as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that we're seen as the credible organization that we are,
Mm-hmm.
that our sources are credible, reputable, verifiable, our
Mm-hmm.
research is sound and ethical and unbiased. We use international human rights standards to follow,
Yes.
because we all know not every country has the same standards for
Oh,
human
there's been
rights.
several discussions recently about the standards across certain countries and how they don't match others.
Yes, exactly. So, with that in mind, having that credibility as an organization is one step
Mm-hmm.
towards making information accessible. And I say that because if you don't have this sound research and
Mm-hmm.
backing the information you're sharing, you're just putting disinformation out there. Um, and I've talked about this in a recent podcast with a different um, organization or individual, I should say, Marla Moody, What Works. We talked
And for
about,
anyone listening here, I would highly recommend you going out and catching that, because I'd listen. It's fantastic. So I would personally, unlike our research, I'm very biased on this sense. I'd highly recommend people to go out and listen to that episode.
thank you. Uh, we were talking about misinformation and
Yeah.
disinformation and how important it is in every aspect of our lives, whether that's from getting credible information about human rights topics
Hmm.
to is this medicine really helpful for what I need, or should I
Hmm.
get vaccinations? Just
Mm.
information in general can really affect our daily lives. That said, we want to combat disinformation and misinformation and get through all that content. And with the average user, no one's going to want to necessarily read a full academic journal
Hmm.
article, and we understand that. So, without sacrificing quality of our researchers' work, we add to it to make it more accessible.
Yes.
As I mentioned earlier, like glossary of terms, not just jargon specific to the field, like if you're doing a legal report,
Hmm.
but words that aren't necessarily understood to general audiences or people
Yes.
outside of human rights. Not everyone knows the difference between a refugee, an asylum seeker, a
Unspeakable.
migrant, things like that.
Yeah.
So, making that more accessible. And then our social media team does a phenomenal job of taking it a step further,
Yeah.
because we now break it down into a summary and bullet points and say, this is what the situation is. Here are some top line points from the article. And please click to read the full thing. And once you open it, you see that these terms are defined. You can click on hyperlinks to learn more. And it's just a way to get through all that academic, um, not necessarily a paywall, although that's a barrier as well, but like academic wall that
Yes.
not everyone understands what's being said.
Hmm.
So, I mean, there are a lot of different strategies around this in the
Hmm.
organization. Like, how can we best get this information in front of people? And currently, this is our process. Like, ma making sure we're known as a credible organization,
Yep.
that our research is credible and verifiable. Making sure that we make it accessible within the actual research publication, and then
Hmm.
making sure we break it down even further on social media for people to
Who
engage
have no
with and
idea. Yeah, of
understand.
course.
So having those kind of three components right now is how we're navigating it. I think in general, it's always going to be a challenge, combat disinformation and misinformation, but that's why people need media literacy. They need
Yeah.
to do their due diligence, ask questions like, is the source credible? Is it reliable? How do I know? Like, is it coming from a biased source like Fox News, for example,
Hmm.
very biased? Um, or are you hearing it from a friend of a friend?
Yeah.
Do you trust that person? Are they giving you critical information that's actually factual, or is it, as the term is used often, fake news?
Of
So, uh, yeah, I mean, I could go more into depth on
course,
that,
yeah.
but I don't want to get off target
I think there's
because,
in the world of and researchers like ourselves, I think it's something you realize quite quickly as to how bad it is out there in terms of information that's come out and who's funded this certain information. Because you'll even yourself, you'll find people you'd probably respect doing great research, but that's been funded by a very biased source. So
yes,
sometimes you just end up, and I found this with my own dissertation where I had to get 3 or 4 sources just to confirm one thing. The average person on the street isn't going to look for 3 or 4 reputable, proven sources to follow a quote that they've read on a tweet or an X or whatever it's kind of social
exactly.
media platform is. So I totally agree to that.
Exactly. And we're seeing so many shifts in credibility and bias because we have companies buying out what used to be a credible resource,
Hmm.
but now it's not because they've bought it out and they have bias. The ownership has bias
Hmm.
and an agenda. So you're seeing that a lot, which is very unfortunate. So something
Hmm.
that we used to rely on isn't necessarily reliable anymore. And to your point, if not everyone's going to do their due diligence and look
Yeah.
it up, this is also something I mentioned with Marla's podcast is ownership.
Hmm.
It's it like if you're going to share something, take ownership that you
Yeah.
didn't research it. Like just say,
Hmm.
um, for example, I said this in the podcast. It's like I saw a video of adorable dogs that apparently escaped a meat packing like farm
Yeah.
off a truck.
Hmm.
And I shared that video and I was like, oh, like these poor dogs, you know, and I didn't do my due diligence and
We've
found out that
all been there.
the context was wrong. The video is
Yeah.
real, but that's not what actually happened. The story behind it was wrong. But I took ownership of that. I
Hmm.
removed that post
Yeah.
and I posted after saying that post I was wrong. I didn't do my due diligence, but it's still such a cute video. So just taking that ownership over things that you're putting out, like
Hmm.
preface what you're sharing. Like
Yes.
if you don't have time to look into it, don't just say, this is amazing. Like, I can't believe this is happening without
Hmm.
you're making claims, um, opinions on something you haven't really looked into.
Hmm.
So it's like if you're going to share something online,
Understand what you're sharing. At
yeah,
least, yeah, you're right. Do
preface,
your
say,
due
um,
diligence.
yeah, if you don't, just say, I'm sharing this. I don't know if it's true, but it
Hmm.
would be amazing if it is. Or like I did with the video, these dogs are so cute. I don't know if this is what actually happened, but I'm glad they're okay. You know?
In such a world of technology, we take what we see is correct, even though we should by nature want to challenge things. We, for some reason, as soon as if there's a video about it or a picture of it, we just assume the context is right. When if you stumbled across it, you wouldn't. You'd probably want to challenge certain things. If somebody else had said it, you'd probably challenge and make sure it was right. But when we see it with our own eyes, we just assume the context is correct.
Yes, face value. And that goes back to trusted sources. Like,
Exactly.
do you trust your friend or your uncle who posted this and just reshare it and take that at face value?
And as a man who's an uncle himself, even I will say, if your uncle posts something, that's not a great source. If something, if the first line is my uncle, the rest of the sentence is probably a moot point. It's normally incorrect. Um, Thinking of what we do, Herc, and everything that you've done over the past few years, I was wondering, is there something from Herc that where you've achieved something that completely exceeded your expectations?
Oh, that's a great question. I think the biggest achievement is the recruitment of so many
Hmm.
volunteers that have also stayed on for so long.
Mm,
I think that's a huge achievement because a lot of organizations don't see that. They see high turnover,
mm.
especially with volunteers.
Volunteering, absolutely.
And I've been just so proud of the fact that I've fostered that environment that people want to
Hmm.
stay in beyond their 6 months time commitments.
Hmm.
Um, it makes me feel good. And also, I've had some volunteers who I've helped with like reference letters and things, and it makes me feel good when they say, I got into grad school or
Yeah,
I got into law school. Thank you so much. And it's heartwarming. I think those are the
that's great to hear. Yeah.
experiences personally that I
Mm.
find most impactful.
And it's human connection as well. You've really they've impacted your life and you've impacted their life as much as all the work that you do here at Herc. It's a life impact there.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the work that we're doing as an
Hmm.
organization, I'm in awe of all the topics that have been researched. As we said,
Hmm.
multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, we have people from so many different backgrounds and they provide different perspectives that I'm not used to. And
Hmm.
so when I get to read their work, just like, wow, I never thought of that, or this is an issue I never would have
Mm.
taken the initiative to look in myself. Um,
No.
so I love reading the research we put out, the news briefs we put out. We launched our
Hmm.
news team a year and a half ago, and they've been incredible as well. So just seeing how much we've grown, not just in number of volunteers, but in like the work that we're putting out, the number of research publications, the number of news briefs, and now hopefully more podcast episodes.
Hmm. We're certainly hoping so. I'm working on it. I mean, I know you've listened to the recent one that we worked on, and again, similar to that, I was just absolutely amazed at the research that was brought forward for that episode. Something I never contemplated, and obviously I'm not going to spoil it for anyone who's going to go and listen. But it was really good, touched upon many things such as migration, security of borders, the problems with technology, going, leaving somewhere, joining somewhere new, and partially touching upon the AI that was involved. And I know I've got another episode that we're going to be recording soon, I believe, on the AI and the human rights around AI, which is going to be a completely evolving topic for the next few years as AI goes from something that couldn't even render Will Smith eating spaghetti, I think famously the video, and now you don't even know what's real and what isn't anymore. It's completely going to change, I think, the world of human rights, to be honest. For good and for bad, I'm not too sure yet. I think that's what we're going to discover. I kind of got one or two final questions, if you don't mind. And again, I appreciate how busy your schedule is for taking some time out for this. But what I'd like to know is, for all the great work you've done at Herc over the past few years and the development of it, I'd love to know where you would like to see Herc in about 5 years' time from now. So hitting 2031, which is very depressing to say that year out loud. Where would you like to see Herc?
Oh, that's a great question. I would love to see like more research
Hmm.
advance more globally as well, get more people involved from various countries. Right now, out of the 100 140 or so volunteers. I think we're
Hmm.
representing 33 countries, which is amazing. But I would love to see more representation
Hmm.
from our researchers, like getting not just the disciplinary, varied perspectives, but
Hmm.
culturally as well, geographically, like,
Yeah.
seeing those. That's one aspect of the organization I'd love to see in 5 years, but also more of advancing our research into policy making,
Hmm.
um, impacting legislation, not just here in the US, but abroad, and doing more on the ground advocacy work because a lot of our advocacy work right now is online
Hmm.
and through networking and communications, but would love to start doing more grassroots action.
Hmm.
And to that point, we recently announced a partnership with Unruled Masses, which is a pro-democracy organization in the United States. And I've helped like
Incredible.
create that
Hmm.
organization with Nick Van Zant, who is the executive director. And with this partnership, they have a lot of civic action that they're focused on. And I think
Hmm.
having this partnership will be so beneficial to our work in
Absolutely.
advocacy and promoting our research and making those
And the two
impacts.
great organizations to push forward together as well
Yeah,
and really kind of build a world around human rights and advocacy. So I want to say thank you very much for taking the time out. I've really enjoyed having this little chat. I know there's worlds of questions I can ask you, but podcast episodes got to be short and sweet. Otherwise, it can be a whole audio book of all the questions that I've got here. One thing I would like to for you to say to listeners is for anyone who's been inspired by today's episode, who's liked what you've talked about or the work we do here at Herc, is there anywhere they can go to get a better understanding, kind of follow what we do, or learn a bit more about what we do?
absolutely. The website is the number one place, which is humanrightsresearch.org. On there, you can see our research, our news briefs. You can look at our volunteer positions. You can donate online as well. And of course, we're on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads
Everything.
currently. Our podcast too, this episode and the previous episode, Talk
For
Rights
those
to
who can't
Me.
say cheering, throwing our arms in the air there.
Talk Rights to Me is on Spotify and YouTube. So, yeah.
And then one final question is what gives you hope for the future of human rights?
Uh, the passion of people still
Hmm.
involved
Yeah.
in the work. Without that passion and commitment, we're not advancing human rights. Like, not everyone can champion for themselves, so it's important to have
Hmm.
people doing the work to help champion for everyone.
Hmm.
I think that's critical.
Absolutely.
So yeah, just maintaining that passion is important. Don't let the dark topics drain you, which can be challenging at
There's a
times because it
lot
can
to
be
get
very
out.
bleak, like seeing all these horrible atrocities, but knowing that the work that we're doing is helping towards improving those conditions, those situations, putting a stop to it, and demanding accountability from international bodies like the ICC and the ICJ, and
Hmm.
just making sure we protect thy neighbor,
Small
protect
things, isn't it?
humanity.
Just small things, and I'm fascinated by how the ICC and the ICJ in recent years, following everything with Israel, everything with Sudan, are coming under more scrutiny to be better organizations and to do more and be more public. And I'm really fascinated by how the passion of some people, including many of our volunteers, kind of pushes for that clarity in large organizations when in theory, the quote unquote the little man shouldn't really be making that big a difference to the likes of the ICC, but they have to be more public now and more upfront. So I agree that we all can do small changes and make a big difference.
Yes, absolutely.
So I want to say thank you very much for coming along and having this chat with me. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure our listeners are going to have a fantastic episode there.
Thank you, Mike. I enjoyed this conversation, and I have a feeling it's the first of many, perhaps.
I feel we're going to get quite a few more in here. There's
Yeah.
reams of questions I didn't get a chance to discuss with you, but I think we can safely say we'll save that for another episode.
Sounds good.
Thank you very
Thank
much for
you.
coming. Thank you.
Okay.